The Women's Leadership Institute in the Auburn University College of Liberal Arts is pleased to present Leaders Educating Through Discussion. We hope you will take a moment after you watch our presentation to add your own voice to the dialogue on our website, auburn.edu/women's leadership.
The Invisible Legacy. It is really looking at the contributions of the women of Tuskegee. Many people know about the men. They know about the accomplishments of the men. They have been taught about George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, but little is known about the women. And one of the things that was very interesting when I first came to Tuskegee was I taught in a building named Margaret Murray Washington Hall. In Margaret Murray Washington Hall, it was a beautiful building, but there was no picture of Margaret Murray. I wanted to know, number one, who was this woman? And the other thing, what did she look like? I mean, you see pictures of all the men across the campus, but you very rarely see the women. And so we began to look into talking with other professors about who these people were. And one of the things that happened out of that was Dr. Gebhardt and I and a professor who's no longer there anymore, but Dr. Tom O'Shea. We thought, well, maybe we should write something. And of course, when we started talking about the writing project, then Dr. Gebhardt said, I know the perfect person to collaborate with us on this. And Dr. Jones was brought in, and the rest is actually history, because in 2000, we got our first grant, which was the Alabama Humanities Foundation grant, that allowed us to do many lectures across Alabama on the subject. Out of that grant was a video that was produced in collaboration with one of our students. And then we were able to get one of our women, Bess Bolden Walcott, inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. And that is no easy feat, because one of the things that they told us when we started this was, first time, you may have to resubmit a couple of times. Well, we're a little apprehensive about that, but we said, no, we're going to put forth what we know. We got it on the first try. So we also created a Tuskegee Women's Calendar in 2003. And that calendar was just basically to let you know about every day there was a woman of prominence that had done something in history who was either a graduate of Tuskegee or associated with Tuskegee as an instructor. We also started an oral history project, and now we are in the process of completing our book. So we've come a long way with this project, and it continues to build. We've had a couple of obstacles, though, and we do have to be aware of that. And I think for you as young scholars, you should be aware that, especially if you're looking at literature in regards to women, one of the things that we find out on Tuskegee's campus, and if you're a good historian, you're going to find out that a lot of the stories are in danger of being forgotten, or they're in danger of being lost if we don't write them down. And everything, we say it has a paper trail, but you really got to be very diligent about preserving. We have to look at the historical documents. Recording women's writing is relatively, well, not women's writing, but recordings of women's lives. It's relatively scarce, especially when we're talking about African-American women. And then especially when we're talking about, again, I have to say, the Tuskegee women. Very little even is known about all of these women. We've had a great resource to kind of help us, and that is Tuskegee University's archives. We have an extraordinary archive. If you get a chance to visit there, it is unbelievable. And the other thing that we have are the living legends. The actual women. Many of the women still live in that community. And we were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to actually videotape people like Mary Stark Harper. We were able to have videotapes of Noel Campbell Mitchell and other women who, some of them have subsequently passed, but we now have that on record. We want to look at, there's a certain way that we want to look and have these women presented. And we're presenting them as transformative leaders. Now, when we say that these women are transformative leaders, we're talking about more so a paradigmic shift in terms of focus, in terms of point of view. And it's not an idea that comes in front where the women basically supersede the men. It is where they come alongside as equals. And this is how we would like for the women to be represented and presented. We look at these women as leaders who emerged alongside the men. And what we try to do is each era, we try to present a comparable woman to every man. And you're going to find that it's very interesting how this occurs. Some notable Tuskegee female transformative leaders: Olivia Davidson, Hallie Tanner Dillon, Margaret Murray Washington, Bess Bolden Walcott, Mildred Hemmings Carter, Alice Coachman, Amelia Boonton Robinson. Do any of these names sound familiar to any of you? Well, when we look here, Olivia Davidson, she is, you didn't know Tuskegee had a co-founder. If anyone has ever read Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery, and we often have to tell people this is not the women saying this is Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington says in Up From Slavery, no one did more toward the founding of this institution than Olivia Davidson. She was the first person that came down with him from Hampton to help start that institution, and she had more education than he did. So she was very... Hallie Tanner Dillon. Hallie Tanner Dillon is the first woman, black or white, to be licensed to practice medicine in the state of Alabama. She's also the first woman to head a medical facility. She was the medical director for Tuskegee Normal School. Margaret Murray. Margaret Murray is sometimes known as Booker T. Washington's second wife. But more than that, Margaret Murray is a self-made woman. Before she met Booker T. Washington, she was the first president of the National Federation of Colored Women's Club. She graduated from Fisk. Upon speaking at her graduation, Booker T. Washington met Margaret Murray, and Margaret Murray walked up to him and said, "I'm going to teach at your institution." She didn't say, "Would you give me a job?" She said, "I'm going to teach." Now, little did he know she actually meant him, but we'll take that. Bess Bolden Walcott is the first African-American woman field director for the American Red Cross. She is the first woman that we had the opportunity to have inducted to the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. Mildred Hemmings Carter. How many of you are familiar with the Tuskegee Airmen? Okay. Do you know that the Tuskegee Civilian Pilot Training Program trained women as well? Mildred Hemmings Carter is the first graduate, female graduate. She's also the first African-American woman licensed to fly a plane in the state of Alabama. It was Tuskegee. Alice Coachman. Alice Coachman is the first woman to win a gold medal in track and field in the Olympics. First African-American woman. Tuskegee. Amelia Boonton Robinson. Often known as the lady beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, but she is also the first African-American woman to run for Congress in the state of Alabama. So we've got, again, some very, and these are just a few, but we want to share with you some specific women that we really want to talk about as transformative leaders. The attributes of a transformative leader: preparation. She has education, she has professional experience, she is creative, and she's collaborative in her work. She has vision coupled with integrity. That is an important key. She has strong core principles that she stands on. A willingness to lead. You have to be willing to take up that responsibility. These women took it upon themselves. Transformative women do hard work and persistent work. They have to take risks. They also give others credit and bring others forward. You cannot lead if people will not follow. These women were very strong, determined, but they were also caring and nurturing. Doesn't have to be sacrificed to be a leader. Finally, these women were willing to change. You have to also recognize that in the process of transformation, you will be changed. It is not possible to have transformation without that change. The other thing is the willingness to share the knowledge. It means nothing. She's also the daughter of a legend, T.M. Campbell. He was the first county extension agent with the agricultural department, the first black. So that was a lot of responsibility, a lot to live up to. He was a very important man in the community. If you ever go to the George Washington Carver Museum, you will see a bust of him there. But more than that, Noelle carved out her own place, and she did it in the military. Now I'm giving you a little bit of history about African American women and their participation in the United States military, because many people think that, you know, women have just started participating. You've been there. And African American women have been in every war in the United States, starting with the Revolutionary War. They were usually there alongside, many of them alongside their husbands. Aha. They fought in the they didn't fight, but they were there in the Civil War. Union soldiers, when they recruited the men, they also hired the women to work the fields and grow cotton that they could ship back to the North. We're in the Spanish-American War. Tuskegee has a distinction in that we had 5 nurses to serve in the army camps in the Spanish-American War. They were in Cuba. World War I, I'm sorry, with the American Red Cross, again going back to the nurses. And Tuskegee has a very historical nursing program. It's the one that most nursing programs in the state of Alabama are modeled after. It also is the first degree granting program, bachelor's. Then World War II, recruitment of black women, the official recruitment of black women into the armed services occurred in 1942. That's on the issuance of Mary McLeod Bethune. In that group, there were 40 women. Among those first 40 women was Noelle Campbell Mitchell. They recruited the officers first. Now you should also know that in terms of Tuskegee's history, military is not, that is not something new. On the campus of Tuskegee, ROTC had been around since the 1920s. So it's nothing new. She was there. Remember, she graduated and got her home economics degree in the 1940s. Okay, so she's there when the Tuskegee Airmen are there, and there's a picture of Noelle and her sister there beside a plane, and they're probably on Moton Field. Okay. Now, as I told you, that civilian pilot training program was unique in that it was the only program that trained women. So what I'm telling you is Noelle grew up in an environment that nurtured her and allowed her to see you could do anything, even serve in the military. This is Noelle as a first lieutenant graduating in 1942 from the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. And again, as I told you, they had about 40 African American women, and they were all officers because they recruited the officers first because they needed them to then train the enlisteds. At Fort Des Moines, Iowa. This is a picture of Noelle and her battalion. Now, something that was interesting about the training that she received is that the enlisted women were completely segregated. Okay? Enlisted white women trained with only white women, enlisted black women trained with only black women. The officers, however, were trained in integrated units. Okay? They trained together. However, they lived in separate sleeping quarters and they ate in separate dining halls. Many times the dining halls that the black women were in were not suitable, and where they lived was not suitable. Noelle, being the child of courage, and again, a product of that, they call it the Tuskegee bubble, led the protest. They wrote letters and finally got their quarters upgraded to where they were equal. Now, this took a lot, and many times they also got the aid of African American soldiers because they wanted to make sure that these ladies were taken care of. So they would come and do work and try to fix things up, but still, the conditions were not equal. These women demanded to be treated equally. They trained equally with their fellow officers, and they saw that their enlisted women were no different, and they should have been treated equally. A. Noelle Campbell Mitchell became the Chief Executive Officer of the 6888th Postal Battalion. This is the largest female military battalion to ever be dispatched overseas during World War II, black or white. This group, this picture that you're seeing here, she is standing with Major Charity Adams. Charity Adams, and during this time, was the highest ranking African American woman in the military. Noelle is her second command, so she is the second. Let's talk about the 6888th. 1945, they're dispatched to Birmingham, England. This is, again, the only African-American battalion to be dispatched. It's the largest female military battalion. They had 863 women. 832 were enlisted, 31 were officers. This group was sent to clear up 3 years of backlogged mail. Now, mind you, these women were not, the women that were inducted into the military early were women who were educated. They had skills. They were not illiterate. These were very educated, knowledgeable women. This task that they were assigned Again, remember, others could not do it. It had been there for 3 years. And if anybody's been in the military, you know how bad it is. You know how bad you want that mail. Get that letter from home. It means the world to you. 3 years. They were able to clear this up in 3 months. That's 7 million pieces of mail. It had to take some coordination. This is a picture of this military battalion, and they were recently honored in Washington, D.C. For their contribution to the war effort. Because again, that, you may not think that, okay, they weren't on the front line shooting, but that was just as important, maintaining morale. We still have that issue today. But these women took to the task.